Hello, welcome to the NUJ webinar on helping you to stay fit and healthy at home and at work. My name is Caroline Holmes and I run the Trade Union Training Programme for the NUJ. So this webinar is going to cover two or three key things really, which I'm going to go through in a second. So how this is going to run is I'm going to be using a PowerPoint to follow a few kind of key headings really, just to take us through. It's also going to be recorded. This is recorded so that you can go back over it and you can check and follow up anything that you want to. Finally, everything's going to be referenced. The final slide on the PowerPoint will have all the references, and it will also have signposts to further places to go for more information. So you can always go back on that and follow up anything that you find. This is a very practical webinar. I'm going to be talking to you about some of the challenges that you're currently facing, we're all facing at the moment. I'm also going to be looking at a number of different strategies. There are lots of different strategies here, some of which you will find useful, some of which you may not find useful, may not be your cup of tea. This is about giving you some ideas, getting you to think about some things that you might want to put into place to help you to deal with some of the challenges that you're currently facing. In fact, we're all currently facing. So this is a very difficult situation that we found ourselves in through no fault of our own. We found ourselves having to live and work in a completely different way, almost overnight. And the challenges that we're facing are ever changing. So some days are less challenging than others. The challenges are changing all the time. So we're really kind of feeling our way through this. And this webinar really is about helping you to help yourselves through this really, and to trying to kind of feel better, feel fitter, and feel productive so that you can actually get something out of this on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to share my screen with you now, and I'm going to use the PowerPoint, as I say, to take you through a few key points. So let's start at the beginning then. This is about staying fit and healthy at home and at work. And this is not just physically fit, this is also looking at your mental health. Both have a part, you know, one has an impact on the other. So physical fitness and mental fitness are intrinsically linked. And the focus of this webinar is on how to stay fit and focused, stay fit and healthy, be productive, thrive, not just survive throughout this time that we're going to be living and working in, but it is actually about trying to find some enjoyment, some self-satisfaction, and actually get something out of your day-to-day lives. So what are we going to be covering then? So we're going to be covering three key areas really. And what's really important here is the focus really is on you. All of you will be potentially juggling a huge number of different responsibilities and be living and working under a lot of pressure. If you're going to continue to be able to support the people in your own homes or outside of your homes in the way that you want to, giving the energy, the focus, the time to all the areas and all the pressures and all the demands that are being made of you, first and foremost, you have to look after yourself. And if you don't put yourself in here, if you don't think about yourself, then you're not going to be able to cope with all the challenges that you're facing. The more you can think about yourself and the more you can put strategies into place, the more you can deal with these challenges in a positive and productive way. And also think about motivation, because one of the key things that we're going to be looking at here is about how to keep motivated throughout this time, particularly when you're suffering from a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. So the first thing we're going to be looking at on this webinar is the first point here on the slide, is why it's important to look after your health. This is your physical and your mental health. So we're going to use this as a starting point. It's important to consider for yourselves why it's important that you want to look after your physical and mental health. Then we're going to move on and look at some of the challenges that you're facing. And of course, I've come up with a number of challenges here, anecdotal, some based on research, but you may well have some for yourselves. So there will be opportunities throughout this webinar to pause, reflect, have a think about what some of these issues are for you. And I will be asking you some specific questions as we go through. So by the end of the webinar, hopefully you'll have some ideas and some strategies that you can actually take away and put into practice, because that at the end of the day is the purpose of this webinar, to give you some practical ideas that you can put into action. So finally, exploring the strategies, lots of strategies for supporting your well-being, your mental and physical health. And again, as I've said, some will be useful for you, some may not be your cup of tea. So let's look at what the NUJ are doing, because the NUJ are working very hard to support members throughout this very difficult time. And the NUJ website has a wealth of information on how to support members and looking at the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on members' lives, work lives. So it's a really good starting point, a good checking in really, if you like, on a regular basis. The website is being updated frequently because obviously we're living and working in an ever-changing situation. So the NUJ is trying to respond to this and come up with some practical ideas, solutions, signpost you to various different places to help and support you through this. So I've put four other places to go to look for information. I'm going to start with NUJ Extra, which is at the bottom there of your screen on the left-hand side. NUJ Extra, for those of you that are unaware of it, is the NUJ charity that can support NUJ members in times of financial and other hardship. And this may be a time when you feel that you need some help from NUJ Extra. NUJ Extra may be able to help you. If you contact NUJ Extra, all the information is on the website. It gives you information on what NUJ Extra can help you with. And the other aspect of this, of course, is NUJ Extra have recently sent out an appeal to all members asking for funds. Of course, lots and lots of NUJ members, some of you may be in this situation yourselves, are suffering from huge financial hardship because of losing work almost overnight. For many of us, work just stopped overnight. And therefore, they're asking NUJ Extra for financial help. And in order to do this, it's important to keep those funds coming in. So if any of you do feel that you are able to support NUJ Extra by providing some donations, then again, information is on the website. So please do have a look. Also on the NUJ website, you'll find a link to the TUC on the top left-hand side here. For those of you, again, who are unaware of the TUC stands for Trade Union Congress. And they are the umbrella body that represents trade unions, the interests of trade unions and their members in this country for those who are affiliated to them. And most trade unions in this country are affiliated to the TUC, the NUJ being one of them. The TUC provide briefings on a regular basis, so you can follow the link from the NUJ website to the TUC briefings. They also hold regular webinars, lots of different webinars on all sorts of workplace and work issues. They're free, anybody can sign up to them, and you will find members from all sorts of different unions sharing their challenges, sharing strategies, talking about what some of the issues are for them. So it's a really good, again, a really good resource for you. Finally, two other places to go. Thompson Solicitors, they have provided a briefing, specifically a really, really comprehensive briefing on what are an employer's responsibilities. So for those of you who are working for an employer, what are their responsibilities towards you in terms of your health, safety and welfare while working from home? And Thompson's have come up with a very comprehensive guide on this. The briefing is on the NUJ website, and plus there is a link also to Thompson Solicitors. Thompson Solicitors are the biggest employment lawyers in the country, and they are the solicitors that support the NUJ and NUJ members. So again, they are a really useful resource for you. And finally, the Health and Safety Executive. The Health and Safety Executive, again, for those of you who are not sure of who the Health and Safety Executive are, they are the body that writes and oversees the implementation of health, safety and welfare legislation in this country. And again, they provide a huge wealth of information around an employer's responsibility. They also help self-employed members. So for those of you who are self-employed, they provide some really useful information on how to look after your health and safety as a self-employed worker. So what do we need to be thinking about in order to be able to make sure that we're working in a healthy and safe way? Clearly, one of the big things for us for those of us who are self-employed is around how to make sure our workstations are set up in a healthy and safe way, so that we're not setting ourselves up for long-term health upper body disorders around health and safety. So things like making sure that your laptop is placed at the correct position, making sure that your chair is at the correct height. All these kinds of things are really important. Screen breaks are important, taking time away, moving around. All these things are part of how we look after ourselves when we're plugged into our laptops for hours and hours, which is what many of us are experiencing at the moment. So please do have a look at the information on the Health and Safety Executive's website as well. So let's move on then and start looking at why it's important to look after your health. And this is a really important question for you to ask yourselves. Why is it important to you that you look after your physical and your mental well-being at this time? This is all about prevention, and this is why we're talking about this. This is about preventing you from having physical and mental health issues today and into the future. If we can put strategies into place now, then we can prevent some of these physical and mental ill health situations from occurring in the future. So let's look at the obvious one here, which of course is the crisis is scary. COVID-19 is scary. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of worries, fears around catching the virus, of course, family members catching the virus, colleagues, friends, etc. We're all worried about how the virus is going to affect us if we do get it. And of course, we want to avoid getting it. So it's a very scary situation to be in. It's also scary because there are a lot of unknowns here. So moving on to the second point here, unknown creates a lot of fear. If we don't know what's coming up, if we don't know what's coming up in the future in terms of our work or our lives, it can create an enormous amount of fear. And of course, fear manifests itself in a very physical way in us. So let's just talk a little bit about how fear can manifest itself in us physically. Think about some of the physical symptoms and how we can recognize anxiety in ourselves. So first of all, I just want to talk about what happens to us in terms of our bodies. And one of the most well-known and researched kind of responses that we often have to fear and anxiety is something called fear, flight, and freeze. So some of you will have heard of fright or fight, but there is also the freeze element to think about here. So flight, for example, let's talk about flight. Our bodies get ready for fear. They want to run away from it. We want to disappear from it. We don't want to face it. Or we want to fight it. So we want to stand up and we want to get rid of it. And the final one is this kind of freeze aspect to our physical response. And the freeze is related to becoming paralyzed. So becoming paralyzed physically and mentally, not being able to think, not being able to focus, not being able to function. Now, all these things are common and normal responses to being in a fearful situation. But of course, none of these responses are actually very helpful for us. They don't actually help us to deal with the anxiety and the fear. So recognizing whether this is something that's happening to us is our starting point, really, because once we can recognize this, then we can do something about it. So let's look at some of the other kind of physical aspects of this. Breathing is a key how we breathe is a key response, really. It's one of the things that can happen without us realizing it, which is how do we breathe when we are worried and we are anxious. So one of the things that can happen is that we breathe too deeply. So we go to breathe too deeply, or we breathe too shallowly, and this can cause something called hyperventilation. Now, this is perfectly normal, but it can leave us feeling very breathless. And of course, feeling breathless, those are symptoms of COVID-19. So of course, this again feeds into our fear of the virus itself. But consider that this is very much related to stress. This is very much related to anxiety. So think about, well, what is this? Is this really something to do with the virus, or is this to do with stress? So being able to identify it can really help you to understand how to deal with it. So let's look at our eyes then, because our eyes also respond to fear. And one of the things that our eyes do is our pupils get bigger, because we want to take in more light, because we're getting ourselves prepared for dealing with the fear. And what this can cause is black spots. It can cause fuzziness, which of course can lead to headaches and migraines. So for some of you who may be predisposed to have a predisposition to headaches or migraines, then this could be something that could occur for you, and you could be suffering from this more regularly. So again, this is very much related to stress. Of course, our bodies heat up as well when we become stressed. And one of the things that our body does when dealing with stress and heat within our body is it tries to cool us down. And one of the things that it does very effectively, of course, is to sweat. So you might find yourself sweating more from underarms, your palms might be sweatier, your forehead might be sweatier. So let's talk about the heart for a minute then, because of course, in order for your body to prepare for fear and anxiety, it starts pumping blood and oxygen around to major muscles to get you ready for that flight or fright kind of situation. This gives you a lot of energy, and it can give you an excessive amount of energy. And this can also lead to things like you feeling like having heart palpitations or heart flutters. So your heart can start thumping. You can feel that your heart is going to jump out of your chest. And it's a very, very common reaction. And it's again related to the stress hormone, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Let's move on to stomach, because this is another area that we hold an awful lot of stress, and we hold an awful lot of anxiety. Our stomachs, other systems in our body, like your digestive system, slow down when we become anxious. So instead of your body giving energy to dealing with maybe the food that you've just eaten, so you might just had lunch, you might just have breakfast, it slows everything down. So it stops your digestive system from working. So whatever you've eaten or whatever's in your stomach then is sitting in your stomach and not being digested. And this can mean that whatever you're eating is sitting in stomach acid. And this, of course, can lead to stomach upsets and stomach aches and all these kinds of things. Now, again, very much related to stress, but it's about identifying and thinking, well, is this something that I'm currently feeling? All these physical responses can lead to an increase in blood pressure, and can also lead to a flood of stress hormones, the two stress hormones being adrenaline and cortisol. And of course, if we have an excess of adrenaline or cortisol, this can lead to things like fatigue, tiredness, and of course, this also feeds into something which I'm sure we're all experiencing at the moment, which is a lack of motivation. How do we actually get up and do things that we need to do on a daily basis? So looking after your health is really important in terms of addressing some of these issues that you might be currently feeling, because if you let these issues go on, if you don't address them, then these can lead to a further kind of detriment to you in terms of your physical and mental well-being. So poor physical health can have a detrimental impact on your mental health. We know through lots and lots of research over the years that these are intrinsically linked. So we need to be looking after both. So we're going to be talking about why it's important to look after both throughout this webinar. And of course, looking after your health helps us to be fit, productive, and positive. And again, this is about challenging your mindset, because a lot of what we're feeling at the moment is we're kind of feeding into our fears and our worries and anxieties, which of course is normal, which can lead us to have very negative thoughts and feel very down and very low about the situation that we find ourselves in. So challenging that mindset, changing our mindset, and start focusing on some of the more positive aspects of the lives that we're leading at the moment can really help us to start challenging some of these issues around motivation, and particularly around feeling not very productive or feeling not very clear about what we want to do. And again, we're going to come back to some of those points. So let's move on to the second point then, which is about looking at some of the challenges. And I split this into two. The first point we're going to look at is looking at some of the life challenges. And obviously there is some crossover here. So first and foremost, it's our inability to be able to look into the future is very challenging for many of us, because many of us plan into the future for work, for life, holidays, all sorts of things. It's very much a part of what we do on a normal day-to-day basis. So not being able to do that is a huge challenge for us. How do we live if we're not living in the future? So again, this comes back to, well, how do we change our mindset and start looking into the future on a day-to-day basis rather than looking way into the future? So how do we start changing our focus, bringing it into a day-to-day basis, and start thinking about what we can achieve on daily rather than over the next month or the next year? And this can be a huge challenge. It can also be a huge challenge in terms of finances. So we've got to talk about that because we know that people have lost their work overnight, and this, of course, is causing huge financial hardship for very many people. So again, looking into the future, how am I going to make money in the future? How am I going to earn into the future? All these things are huge challenges and cause an enormous amount of anxiety for many of us. Let's talk about loneliness and lack of human interaction, because we know that living in isolation can cause an enormous amount of feeling of isolation, can cause an enormous amount of anxiety around not having that human interaction, because a lot of our mental health and our mental well-being concerns having that face-to-face interaction on a regular basis with people. So some of you may be may live on your own, and in fact in normal day-to-day circumstances living on your own is absolutely fine, and you enjoy it because you dip in and out of human interaction, come back to your home, and you enjoy your own company. When you have that lack of human interaction, then that fear of that sense of isolation can increase. And again, it's a huge challenge for many of you that are living on your own, particularly if you're living on your own and you're living somewhere but that maybe doesn't have access to the outside. So again, we're going to be talking a little bit about that because it's an important thing to acknowledge, that sense of well-being and our connection with the outside world. Third point here is constantly checking media feeds. Of course, there are so many unknowns and we want more information. We want to know more about what's happening, because when we don't know what's going on, we feel out of control. So constantly checking media feeds is a tendency for us to be doing that at the moment, because we want to know what's going on. We want to know whether there are any decisions being made about when we can come out of lockdown, when we can start going back into work, when we can start going back into what we consider to be normal life, the life that we had before. So there is a tendency to be doing a lot of that. And it's really important to make sure that you think about, well, how often do I check the media feeds? Am I getting an overwhelming amount of information here? Because one of the challenges is about getting enough information for us to stay safe and to keep informed and to keep us aware of what's going on. To the other end of the spectrum, really, which is about having an overwhelming amount of information, some of which may not be credible. We know there's a lot of kind of conspiracy theories out there, which are not helpful to the debate and not helpful to the discussion. So it's important to think about, well, am I getting the balance right here? The fourth point here I want to talk about is something called brain fog. And this is a term which we're hearing of more and more to describe competing ideas, competing anxieties and fears which are occurring in our brains all the time, often in the middle of the night for many of us. So brain fog is about our inability to be able to kind of get any clarity, to be able to get any focus. And of course, like many of these things, brain fog comes and goes. So sometimes we might have clarity of thought. Sometimes we might think, actually, I can't work my way through today. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got no structure. I can't focus on anything. One minute I'm doing that and then I'm distracted on doing something else. So brain fog, I think, is a common experience for many, and we're seeing a lot of anecdotal evidence coming out about the impact of brain fog on many people's day-to-day lives. I want to look at poor health habits now. Well, it's very easy when we haven't got a structure in our life to develop poor health habits. Structure, a lot of our structure is around our work. Whether you're going into work or whether you're working from home, whether you're freelance, work, we hang the rest of our lives. Most of us hang the rest of our lives around work structure. And when we haven't got that, we've got to think about putting a structure in for ourselves, which we'll talk about. So, poor health habits are very easy to get into. We're working at home. Many of us are working at home. Some of you may well still be going into work, which we'll talk about in a second. But nonetheless, health habits such as not getting enough exercise, very easy to slip into when we're stuck on computers all day, when we're stuck in the house all day. Other health habits, of course, are around not eating properly, snacking. We know, again, through research that's already coming out, which is about the levels of snack foods that are being eaten. We know more and more people are drinking. So, for example, some of the research that's coming out of America at the moment through one of the media outlets called Axios, AXIOS, have already come out with some research which are looking at some of the poor health habits of Americans. Some of the things that they're finding already is that, for example, alcohol, the amount of alcohol that people are buying has kind of gone through the roof. 75% more spirits are being bought, more beer is being bought, more wine is being bought. Americans are talking about sitting down and streaming more, watching box sets, spending much more time in a sedentary position. The other things that people are doing, that people are not taking enough exercise. So all these things are about setting ourselves up for a very poor health in the future. And why we're talking about these issues now is about putting stuff into place to prevent this. So consider what some of your poor health habits are, and think about poor health habits in relation to guilty pleasures. It's really important to remember at this time that there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. We need to treat ourselves, and we need to make sure that we have distractions and we can go and do those kinds of things, but it's about making sure they don't become habits, because one of the things about poor health habits is they can soon become a part of our routine, and we forget that actually we need to be challenging them and need to be doing something about them. So have a think about what some of your poor health habits might be now, and be honest with yourself. So let's look at work then. Of course, I've already talked about work. Some of you, work has disappeared overnight. Very, very stressful for many of us who have lost work overnight, which of course has an impact on our finances and our future ability to be able to make money. So of course, this is a huge life worry, because this has an impact on the decisions that we make in our everyday lives. And finally, I've mentioned structure. We have to put our own structure into place, whether we're working or not. we need to put a life structure into place, which is quite different from a work structure, because it's about trying to get that work-life balance. So what kinds of things are we doing to structure our days to ensure we're having good health habits, for example? What are we doing in our days? How much time are we spending working? How much time are we spending doing other things in our life that are really important to help us through this very, very difficult and challenging time? So let's move on then, because I want to look at some other challenges, and I want to start looking at work. And I've split this into two. One is going into work and one is working from home, because some of you will still be going into work. So it's important to acknowledge some of the concerns and challenges that you might have still going into work. So, for example, let's talk about concerns about safety, because I'm guessing that many of you are worried about travelling into work for a start. You're also worried about when you get into work, making sure that social distancing is put into place and everybody's abiding by it, making sure that all the equipment that you're using is cleaned and it's cleaned on a regular basis. All these are going to be concerns for you. And of course, many of these concerns are not just concerns that you may well have, but you might find that other NUJ members have these concerns as well. So a lot of the concerns that you might have around safety, welfare, other issues while you're at work, it's really important to talk to other NUJ members. It's really important to talk to your chapels and your branches about these concerns, because these need to be raised with your employers. They need to be putting a policy into place to ensure that your safety and welfare concerns are being addressed. And this is something that your chapels will be in discussion with the employers with, to develop things that are supporting your concerns and making sure that you are safe at work. Because of course the other consideration, and I'm sure many of you are concerned about this, is, well, how do I ensure that when I come home that I'm not going to be bringing unsafe practices into my home to make sure that my family are safe as well. So of course that's a big concern for you, and that needs to be built into the discussion. Juggling childcare and caring responsibilities. Many of you will be going into work and juggling childcare. So some of you may well be a key worker, so you may well be leaving children at nurseries or at schools, whatever it might be. You're juggling this, so you're going to work, you're coming home, and then you're having to deal with all the other issues and anxieties and caring responsibilities that you might have for people in your home or outside your home. So, for example, you might have elderly relatives or people that you're caring for that don't live anywhere near you, and you're having to sort out support for them, food for them, all those kinds of things. Let's talk about working hours and expectations, because it's really important to kind of understand really that we can't possibly be working in the same way. We are not going to be as productive as we were under normal circumstances, because we're not living and working in normal circumstances. So thinking about what kind of hours you're working and the expectations related to those hours are again a really important have a really important conversation to have with your chapels and with your branches. You need to be speaking to other NUJ members about this in your workplaces. Are the expectations realistic with everything else you've got to deal with in your lives? And if they're not, how are these going to be addressed? And again, most of these issues should be addressed through your collective NUJ chapel and branch networks. So let's talk about working from home for the first time, because for many of you, this may well be the first time you've ever worked at home. Some of you, you may be getting on with it, you might enjoy it, you might actually thrive from working at home and enjoy some of the benefits from working at home. You might enjoy the benefits of being able to spend more time with your family, spend more time in the home. But for many of you, this won't be a good time for you for lots and lots of different reasons. You may be working and living in an unsafe environment, and therefore this just increases your feeling of feeling unsafe. So working from home can cause an awful lot of challenges for many, many people. You may well not have a structure. You may well not know how to actually get that balance between having a work life and having a home life. You've got to put this structure into place. You can't rely on anybody else to do this. And I've seen some really good examples of where people have got whiteboards and they're quite prescriptive about what they do in their day. So they get up at the same time every day. They may start the day with some music, because lots of people find music very uplifting and a very good way of starting the day. They may well then have an hour's worth of working on a laptop, then they've got breaks built in, and then another hour maybe, and then a proper lunch break. So all these things can help you to challenge some of those unhealthy habits, particularly unhealthy habits around sitting too long, not taking breaks, not eating properly. So again, this is about finding something that works for you. You might feel that that's too prescriptive. Actually, you don't need that kind of structure. What's really important here is to ensure that you put something into place that is useful for you, because one of the things about working from home, and again, research, anecdotal and otherwise, is coming out now around working from home, which is that most people who work from home overwork at home. So they do too much work. They spend too many hours sitting at a laptop, too many hours working. And actually what you need to do is to get that balance. And actually you need to be spending less time working now than you were before, because you need to be spending time looking after yourself. And this will mean things like making sure you've got things into place to help your physical and your mental well-being, which we'll come on to. Let's talk about new technology. New technology, some of us are working with technology that we've never worked on before. We're having to learn it ourselves, because often we're being left with, we've had the technology set up in our homes and we've just been left to get on with it, particularly around new platforms that many of us are using. Some of you may well have a workplace that is helping you to deal with any of the technological issues that you've got, maybe breakdowns or just problems with actually accessing some of this stuff. Remember, your IT departments are going to be working flat out as well, supporting you. So again, a huge challenge for you in getting these things sorted out. If you're freelance or self-employed, well, even more of a challenge. What happens if your laptop breaks down? That's your kind of whole world just disappeared, not just work world, but your life world as well. So how do you get that sorted out? Where do you go to get the help? You know, how many people, how many of you are involved in local WhatsApp groups or support groups in your communities? Really important sources of information, really important places to go if you have questions, if you need to ask people if they know anybody that's dealing with this. And actually, I've heard examples recently where a freelance worker, their laptop broke down, they went onto their local WhatsApp group for their road, said, does anybody know of anybody that mends laptops? Immediately they were put in touch with somebody. That person came to the house, picked up the laptop, took it away, and then sorted it out for them. So it is about, you know, finding ways of being able to get around some of these challenges. Working safely is really important. Talked a little bit about the health and safety executive, so I'm not going to talk about this in great detail really, but it is about making sure that you build safe working practices into your day, taking those breaks, moving around, stretching, rolling your shoulders, all these things that perhaps we've forgotten to do. If we don't do these things, these will build up into potentially long-term health issues for us, particularly around neck and shoulders, arms, carpal tunnel, all these kinds of things are really important to think about now. We want to avoid getting into those situations. Fourth point here is around interruptions. Well, we know we're not working in a normal way. You may have a household full of people, children, animals, whatever it might be, and it's inevitable that interruptions will take place. This is perfectly normal, and I think we need to just accept that this is a normal part of our day-to-day now. We also may be working somewhere where there's noise going on outside that we have no control over, that will inevitably have an impact on if you're having a meeting on Zoom, or you're having a discussion, or you're running a training course, or you're trying to write something, whatever it might be. These interruptions will take place, and unfortunately it is going to become our new normal, and this is important to accept and kind of build into your day really. Juggling, again, I've talked about. How do you juggle your work-life balance? How do you juggle the needs of the people that need you, your children, other family members, other people that you're looking after? And how do you also fit yourself in there? Because an important part of juggling is making sure that you put your own needs there. Because if you can't look after your own needs, then it makes it very difficult to look after the needs of others. Two other things I've put here around challenges of work. Again, you might be working for somebody, so you might have an employer. And one of the things that we're finding already is that many line managers are kind of going overboard in terms of communication. And we're finding that there is a balance here that needs to be discussed and needs to be struck in terms of enough communication to support you as a worker working at home. And again, at the other end of the scale is expecting you to be in communication with your line managers on an over regular basis. And one of the things that can happen here, and we're certainly seeing this in education, for example, is that certain staff are being asked to kind of write down what they're doing as they're going through the day. They're being asked to fill in a timetable of what they're doing and when they're doing it. So we need to recognise this. This is micromanaging. This is not managing you to support you and being there to help you to address your concerns and issues. This is about too much communication. So getting the balance right is really important. If you feel this is an issue, it is an important issue to raise through your chapel and branch structures, because this needs to be addressed, because this can lead to added pressure and of course can feed into your anxiety. Fear of returning to work too soon. Some of you may well be furloughed, you may well be away from work and you're worried about when you're going to be asked to go back into work without having the proper discussions around how these safeguards around COVID-19 are going to be addressed. These are discussions you need to be having through your chapels, really important discussions to have to make sure that safeguards are put in place and that you as a chapel are part of the discussion. You are part of the discussion with your employer and part of how the employer addresses these concerns. Let's move on then to looking at some strategies. And I've taken this from the educationsupport.org website. This is based on, and I've added extra ones in because obviously this is customised to an NUJ perspective, which is quite different from education, but there are some crossovers. So exploring strategies, work out your priorities, work out what you can actually achieve in a day. Being asked to do something in a day, you know, is it realistic? Are you being asked to do too much? So think about what you can actually do in a day, what's achievable in a day, what's realistic. You might start your day with 10 things on a list, but actually get 3 things done and then only focus on the 7 things that you can't get done. It's really important to think about what you can realistically achieve in your day. So think about what your priorities are on a day-to-day basis. And of course, these priorities may change from day to day. So you might find that one day you want to focus on certain things and then on another day you want to focus on others. And this can change. So think about that. Identify your stress situations. Stress situations, understanding your triggers that can help you to understand how to manage them and challenge them. There is a template which is going up on the NUJ website which will go with this webinar, and it's a stress management tool. It's a template of a little timetable really of how you can identify what your stress situations might be, what's caused the stress situations, and then any strategies that you might have to put into place. It's a really good tool to help you to reflect on how well you're managing your stress, whether you need to change things, whether you need to add anything in. So it can be a useful tool for you if this is something that you like using. Third point here is thinking before you commit. And I've put this in here because at a time like this, when lots of people are going off sick, some of your colleagues might actually have the virus, maybe self-isolating. Some might not be able to do any work at all. You may be asked to do more work. So it's really important that you think before you commit. So think about whether you can take on board what you're being asked to take on board, whether you're prepared to take on board some of what you're being asked to do, but you'll have to park some of the other things. So think before you commit. Remember, you've got a right to think, you've got a right to consider, you've got a right to seek advice before you make that decision. Dwelling on your mistakes, the fourth point here, I've put this down because I think it's really important to acknowledge that at this time, throughout this time, we are going to make more mistakes. There's no doubt about it. We're already seeing people talking about the fact that they're making mistakes that they never made before. They forget things that have always been kind of normal practice for them. We are going to make mistakes because our brains do suffer from brain fog. We are not operating and not functioning at the same level that we were functioning at before. So it's really important to think about, you know, when you make a mistake, why did you make that mistake? What can we learn from that mistake? And what can we put into place to help us not to make that mistake in the future? And use it as an opportunity to learn something more about yourself. But the important thing is not to dwell on it, not to go back over it and think, oh, why did I do it? Learn from it, move on, and don't dwell on it, because this will only drag you backwards. Other strategies: set specific time aside for physical activities. So we've talked about priorities, we've talked about routines, we've talked about getting a plan into place, and part of your plan has got to be setting time aside for physical activity. And I don't mean that, you know, you've all got to go out running suddenly, or you've all got to go out jogging, or whatever it might be. Physical activity can mean anything from moving around, walking. If you've got stairs in your home, running up and down your stairs rather than walking up and down your stairs. It can mean walking around your garden. We've seen some really good examples of people who are doing physical activity. So rather than walking around their garden once or twice, going around 20 or 30 times. It's all about moving, and it's all about making sure that we can challenge the sedentary state we kind of find, many of us find ourselves in, which is either working excessively or just being in the house excessively and not being able to move around enough. There are lots of things that you can do, lots of free online activities that you can do, that you can sign up to. Lots of people are into this Joe Wicks thing that lots of children do every morning, but there are lots of other things around yoga, Pilates, lots of other stuff that you can sign up to. So have a look, see what other people are doing. What's important is you acknowledge the need to do it and the need to build it into your everyday, not just once or twice a week. Physical activity's got to take place every single day. Take your time when planning, take your time when thinking about what you're going to do and how you want to do it. Again, this is about slowing things down, really. We're all living in quite a frenzied time where things have kind of happened overnight. Things have been put into place overnight. We've had to respond very quickly. And quite often we've responded quickly without really thinking about whether this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. So take your time in considering what's your best approach, what's the best platform that you might want to use, how you're going to approach this meeting, how you're going to approach this job, what are you going to put into the job, how are you going to do your research, how long is it going to take? Most of us are going to be taking a lot longer to do the work that would normally take us not very long at all. We are going to be taking longer because we're not functioning at the same level, as I've mentioned. So it's important to take your time. Thinking positively. I talked about mindset right at the beginning of this webinar, and changing your mindset and changing it into a more positive mindset is a really important way of helping you to deal with some of the challenges that we've been talking about here. So rather than thinking about what you can't achieve, think about what you can achieve. Focus on the good stuff rather than the not so good stuff. So rather than thinking about, well, what we've lost, what we can't do anymore, well, what can we do now that perhaps we didn't do before? So for example, many people, certainly many parents and carers, are saying they're spending some really lovely time, quality time with their children that they never had time to do before because they were commuting, or they were sitting in an office somewhere, or they were traveling a lot for their work, whatever it might be. Some people are saying they're spending a lot more time in the garden, if you've got a garden, or reading. There are lots of things that are positive about the situation that you can focus on rather than focus on the negative, and it will help you then to deal with some of the anxieties that you might be feeling. This is about not saying that, you know, you ignoring stress is, you know, if stress is there, and many of you, it's a very, very real thing for many of us. We can't ignore it. We have to deal with it. And the more we ignore it, the greater the feeling of stress can be in us. So it's important to acknowledge it and then think about, well, what can I do to actually shift my focus here? Cutting down on unhealthy habits, I've already talked about that, particularly around working on a laptop or working on a computer all day. Really important to take more time thinking about what those unhealthy habits are. But it's really important to think that, and I want the point at the bottom here, which is about distracting yourself guilt-free. It is okay to have that glass of wine if that's your thing, or that beer, or watch that box set, or whatever it might be that distracts you, because distraction is a really important part of helping you not to think about the situation that we're living and working in at the moment. And to do it guilt-free, something we've got to learn to do. And that again is really important, because if we're watching a box set and we're feeling guilty, thinking we should be doing something else, then we're not getting the enjoyment we should be getting out of it. So it's important to have some distractions, but it's about making sure they don't become too habitual and that we spend more time doing those than we do doing all the healthy stuff. The top point there on the left, which is about creating a window, is really important around checking social media feeds, checking news, whatever it might be. Create a window can be a really good way of managing that balance between getting enough information and not getting an overload of information. So, you know, doing something like maybe checking in the morning, once you've got up, had your cup of tea, coffee, whatever it might be, had your breakfast, then you check the news. You check the news feeds, however you check your news and current affairs. Give yourself half an hour, and then that's it for the day. And then maybe check in later on in the day. It will prevent you from constantly checking feeds throughout the day, constantly getting information and being overwhelmed with information. So find a window, whenever it might be, but find a window, because that will help you to manage it. Anxiety comes in waves. It's really important, as I've talked already about anxiety and stress. Anxiety very rarely kind of sits with us all the time. Most of the time we have periods of the day when we don't have any anxiety at all. We focus, we get on with what we need to do. At other times we might find the anxiety overwhelming. Be prepared to acknowledge that, accept it, and then think about, well, how do I cope with these waves? How do I manage these waves? How do I get through these? Be flexible is an important point here. There are lots of strategies that I've given you here. It's really important to be flexible about what you can and can't do. You might start doing something, and you might start out getting up at 7 o'clock every morning, going for a walk, doing some exercise, whatever it might be. The next day you might not feel like doing it. Be flexible, be prepared to start things, try things out, throw it away, start something else. Be prepared to change things. Don't feel you've got to stick to a particular plan or a prescriptive way of doing something. If it doesn't work for you, and if it's not working for you, be flexible, try something else. Staying in touch is a really, really important strategy here. And this is about making sure that we can try and get some kind of face-to-face communication. We know through research that's been done over many, many years that face-to-face communication is one of the most rewarding ways that we can have communication with anybody. So losing that face-to-face, we've got to try and find some way of being able to replicate it. And of course, there's no way we can possibly get the same from online communication that we can from face-to-face. But there are some things that we can do to help us to do that. And that's, again, about building it into your day. Make sure that you've got communication in there, that you're staying in contact with friends and family, all these people that are important to you to help you with your mental well-being. This is really, really important. So think about what communication is useful. If you've spent all day on Zoom, for example, you might not want to have a family Zoom in the evening. You might want to think about using WhatsApp or another way of doing it. You might want to find a different way of doing it. So think about what works for you. But what's important is you build this into your everyday routine. So we've talked about the moment. We've talked about trying to live within the day, within the moment from day to day, and try and move away from this anxiety that we have about not being able to see in the future. Meditation and mindfulness and breathing activities can really help us to kind of focus on the day to day and really help us to focus onto the positive kind of good stuff from the day to day, really. So think about meditation and mindfulness. There are lots of free online classes being held. I've put a link at the end on the PowerPoint from an organisation called Life Raft. They run some really good meditation, mindfulness and breathing exercises, class exercises. They also have a host of resources which they're updating all the time. It's only one of them. You might have your own that you think are useful. So please do just have a look around. And of course, yoga and Pilates are in there as well. They're really good to help you kind of to stay in the moment and focus on the moment. Some of you may well be living in flats. You might be living in a tower block. You might have no access to the outdoors at all. So I want to speak in a moment about how you can bring the outdoors inside, because we know, again, mental well-being is very much connected with the outdoors, being connected with nature, being able to get access to nature. And when we're disconnected from that, when we feel isolated from that, we need to find other ways of being able to bring it into our lives. And finally, the final point here around kind of strategies really is about improving your sleep. We all, I'm sure, are feeling the effects of having unbroken sleep, not having a decent night's sleep. We can improve our sleep if we understand why our sleep is being broken, and there are things that we can do to improve it. So I want to talk about that as well. Streaming sounds and vision from the outdoors. So these three organisations that I found that have got some really good resources that you might find useful. The Woodland Trust at the top there, they have a really good webcam that's in an osprey nest in Scotland. So you can follow the day-to-day activities of the osprey if that's interesting for you. The Wildlife Trusts also have a host of resources on their website. Some of the resources are about how you can access wildlife in your local area. So how do you access it when you've only got kind of a mile radius to be able to kind of enjoy when you go and do your hour's worth of exercise a day. They also have webcams and they have a YouTube channel. That might be something that you want to look at. And finally, the RSPB have a brilliant resource for those of you that haven't got a window, or you've got no nature very close by to where you live, got no access to it for whatever reason. They have something called a birdsong radio, which you can go on, click onto, and it will bring the birdsong into your homes. 10 tips for better sleep. I just want to draw your attention to this really. The World Economic Forum have got some really useful resources in conjunction with the World Sleep Society. We've done a lot of research around this. Again, the link is on the slide at the end of this PowerPoint. I just want to identify 2 or 3 things here, and you can go back to this afterwards, obviously. First of all, establishing a regular bedtime and waking time can really help you to improve your sleep. They found that if you can kind of build it into your day, maybe have the odd night when you might stay up a little bit longer, but on a general basis it's about making sure that you have regular bedtimes and waking times. It can really help to establish a pattern and can help you to kind of get good sleep. Secondly, we're all feeling more tired now. We're all suffering from fatigue that we've never felt before. It's absolutely fine to have a nap if you're tired, but make sure you don't have a nap for too long. So the optimum is no more than 45 minutes and not too late in the day. So what is said by the World Sleep Society is if you have a nap that's over 45 minutes long, it will upset your circadian rhythms, which is your ability to be able to get to sleep when you go to sleep at your normal bedtime. And then finally, point number 9, block out all distracting noise and eliminate as much light as possible. This also links into use of tablets, phones, laptops and TVs, of course. We know again through research that too much screen time can really upset your circadian rhythms. And if you use these too close to your bedtime, you'll find it very difficult to either go to sleep or to have a proper full night's sleep. So again, the World Sleep Society recommends staying off laptops, staying off phones, all this screen time, at least 2 hours before you want to go to sleep. So find another way of being able to kind of lull you into your sleep. So it's about having that kind of routine really towards going to bed. I like this quote from Ramez Sasson. Positive thinking is a mental and emotional attitude that focuses on the bright side of life and expects positive results. Feeds into something that I've been saying all the way through this, which is about focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't do. So it's about developing a positive thinking, positive attitude, because if you have a positive attitude, then the results will be positive. So it's about kind of setting yourself up for a more positive outcome. If we have a negative attitude, then we're likely to have a more negative result. So it's about, again, challenging our mindset. This is not going to happen overnight. This is about practicing, and this is about taking some of these techniques, putting them into place, trying them out and developing them over the coming days and weeks. Finally, very finally, 2 other things here. The top one is keeping a diary or a journal. Now, some of you who'll be watching this will be journalists, and some of you will be used to writing a daily journal. A daily journal can be useful to help you specifically look at how you're feeling on a day-to-day basis. So if you write down how you're feeling and what you've put into place to help you to deal with how you're feeling, it's a useful reflective tool. You can see how you're managing your stress and anxiety. You can hopefully see how you're improving and helping to have a better and a more positive attitude. This might be your thing, and again, it might just be another burden for you that you think, actually not for me. So use it if you think it's useful. There are lots of templates out there that you can download as well. The bottom point here is the NHS has a really good tool. The link again is on the PowerPoint at the end. The tool is a 5-questioned quiz, and it's a really good quiz. It only takes you a few seconds to do it, and at the end of it, it will come out with some strategies that can help you to deal with some of the issues that you might be facing. It has been developed and redeveloped specifically for the COVID-19 crisis, so it's very specific for the situation that we're all finding ourselves in now. So please do have a look at that. It doesn't take very long, and it may just give you a few additional ideas. So finally, the references and the links to further information are all at the end of this PowerPoint, which of course you can go back to because this has been recorded. I hope you found this webinar useful, and I hope you found some strategies that you think you can take away and put into place. Please do keep a check on the NUJ website for any further information of webinars that might be coming up and further training opportunities. Thank you very much for giving up your time to watch the webinar, and please do stay safe and stay well. Thank you.